Welcome, everybody, to The Adult Chair. I'm Pete Wright. I'm here with Michelle Chalfant. Michelle?
Hi, Pete.
It's like you don't return my calls. You don't talk to me anymore. We're just, and I get to thinking that maybe you've run off with another podcaster.
Never would I leave you.
How have you been?
Everything's been going really well. I've just been doing a lot of writing, a book and some new classes for the spring. So I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit behind on these podcasts, but I'm ready to go.
Excellent. Well, I'm very excited about this, and we've gotten such wonderful comments from folks on the show, and so I'm so glad to hear that you know, what you have to talk about is connecting with people. It's such a great treat to see that activity. So
I agree. Great feedback. I'm very happy about this. So
coming off of January, the month of renewal, and here we are. This is like the year finally starts now. It's February. It's the Super Bowl is over. Now it's time to get serious.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk today about the stories and assumptions that we tell ourselves. And I have an idea. In fact, I think I just did it. I have an idea what you're talking about, but I wonder if you could tell me, just give me an example. Tell me a time when the stories and assumptions have sort of reared their heads in your own life.
One of my missions is to help people to get unstuck. And one of the ways that we get stuck in our lives is we continue to tell ourselves stories and assumptions, and which is typically an unconscious thing. Like, we're not conscious about what we are saying to ourselves. The brain just makes up stories about things to try and keep us safe. It tries to keep us from feeling abandoned by people. And let me give you an example of what I mean by a story or an assumption. I walked in last Saturday to my son's basketball game, and my husband had gotten there ahead of me, and I came in like at a half, or not at halftime, but like at a timeout or something. So the whole court was clear, and I walked completely in the middle of the court, and I saw all the parents, and my husband was sitting there, and there was no room. So I just sit at the far end all by myself. I just sat there. I was on the phone, so I really didn't think anything of it. And then, so is it 3 periods of basketball? Anyway, at the end of the third period, I think it's 3 or 4 or something, whatever. I'm not an airhead. It's just, this is a new sport. You know, I'm a soccer mom. But anyway, I think at the end of the third period or fourth, whatever, it was the end of the game. Put it that way. I turned and I was waving to one of the parents, and I saw my husband, and I waved to him, and he gave me this look like, where the heck have you been? So he came walking down. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, when did you get here? I said, well, I've been here, since the middle of the first period. And he said, well, why didn't you see? And I said, I saw you when I walked in, and I said, and I thought you were mad. I just assumed you were like in a bad mood and didn't feel like sitting with me. And he goes, I didn't even see you.
He had no idea that this exchange was going on in your head.
Exactly. And I didn't sit down there. I wasn't stewing. I just thought, well, he must be in a bad mood because he doesn't want to sit next to me. Whatever.
Okay, well, to be fair, you are sort of enlightened in this area. I think many people, myself included, may have stewed.
Right.
That's kind of my reg, because when I have that response to, oh my gosh, there was my wife up there. She clearly saw me. We made eye contact. I don't know that she didn't trigger that I was just another face in the crowd. I would sit down and likely I would stew a little bit. What is she mad about? Well, now I've done something wrong. I'm
so glad that you're saying that. That's such a great point, Pete. That's what we do. So we make up an assumption. So my assumption was, wow, he must be mad at me. But let's go back to the chairs. That's the adolescent chair that would say, it's the ego that says, okay, here's my assumption. I'm going to guess and make up a story that he is mad at me, so he's not coming down to sit with me. Right?
Right.
But I then went back to my adult chair and said, oh, well, okay, well, if he's mad, he's mad. And I let it go. I didn't think about it again. I was like, okay.
Because the adult chair can let go.
I can let it go. He can have a bad mood, and I detached from it. Now, the issue is that I did make that assumption, and I didn't sit with him the entire game because of an assumption that I had made. It's really bouncing back and forth between this ego part of us, which is the adolescent chair, and stepping back into the adult chair. So if I was in my adult chair, I would have walked in. I would have, looked over where he was, maybe waved just to see like, hey, is he seeing me? Is he not seeing me? I might have walked over to him and said, hey, I'm going to sit down here at the end, something like that. But It didn't really matter to me. I thought, well, whatever. If he's sitting down there talking to other parents, that's fine. I'm going to sit down here. But what we do in life throughout the day, every single day, the brain, we look at different things or people or have these experiences, and we are living in these stories and assumptions, and most of them are not true.
Well, look how easy it was. I opened this podcast with a story and assumption. Now, I was making a joke, but that joke comes from a kernel of something truth, right?
Sure.
Why don't you call me about podcasting anymore? Well, obviously that's not true. We talk all the time. But how easy is it for me, to slip into this mode? Because I think I do have a natural habit about that. Yes, somebody cut me off on the highway. Maybe he's a Viking and he's on his way to... whatever the case, I make up these stories about why I'm unsettled about my reaction to the world. And I wonder, why do we do that? What is it that my sort of subconscious adolescent chair is trying to do for me? It's filling some hole. What is that hole?
It's trying to keep us safe, always. This is the chair of the survivor and the protector. So no matter what, it's trying to keep us safe. It's trying to keep me safe, trying to keep me safe. So no matter what, it's going to assume, like, have you ever done this in a car? Remember this one time I was in a car, when you're talking about like the Viking in the car, I was in this car, and when you have two lanes that are turning side by side, when you have to make like a left or a right turn and they're both going in the same direction. Well, many, many times people that are next to me cut me off, or
right, because they'll be in like the outside lanes. They'll be in the outside lane and they'll come in. Yeah,
exactly. Well, this happened to me one time, and I was ticked, and I was like cursing at the person, like, what the hell is their problem? Don't they know how to drive? And I'm making up some story
makes you look
about
insane,
that.
Completely batty lady in the car next to her.
It's the same part, though. That's the part that makes up the stories. And then when I get next to the person, it was a friend of mine. I'm like, oh, hey, it's you, Michelle. How are you doing? I wait to her, and it was gone. But this is what I'm saying. It happens. It slips in. This ego part of us slips in these stories and assumptions all the time throughout the day. So what we want to do is to become story busters, is what I call it.
Okay, story busting. I'm so glad you got here. So you are now encouraging us to incite a debate with ourselves.
Yes.
Right? Have that conversation out loud about your story, right?
Well, and this is how we do it, which is so cool. We become, we want to be story busters, and we can only do that from the adult chair. And in the adult chair is the only place where, number one, we are present moment. And also, that's where we sort for fact and truth. So I say to people, think of yourself like a reporter. Only report the truth. So, for example, I have a whole bunch of examples. I just had a client the other night who was talking to me about, her granddaughter is having all of these bad experiences because of how her daughter is talking in front of her and how her daughter is treating her. And the granddaughter is going to be damaged by all of this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, and it was like one assumption after the next, which, by the way, I'm not judging. I'm just saying this is just how we live. Well, I know that my granddaughter is damaged because, my daughter talks like this in front of her, and I saw this happen, and her face changed when I walked in the room, and I think she's now mad at me too. And you know how we all do that. She must be mad at me because when I walked in, her face, she didn't say hello to me, whatever. So I said to my client when she was telling me about her granddaughter, I said, well, tell me what's true. She says, well, I walked in the room and my granddaughter's face changed. I said, okay. And her granddaughter's like 12, 13 months old, by the way. Okay. It's not like she's 13 years old. She's months old.
Months old. I think I missed that. Months old.
Months.
And her face changed.
She had this humongous story, like for 10 minutes, went on about how the granddaughter, was being damaged and et cetera, because of all of these things happening. And I said, okay, so her face changed. I said, and what else? What else is true? I said, just report the facts. Well, her face changed. I said, and then we both laughed, and she started laughing. I said, do you see the difference between the adolescent chair and you slide into the adult chair and you become a reporter of facts? And it busts the story. The story goes away. And this just takes practice, and we have to become aware. And the chair of awareness is the adult chair. it's the conscious part of us versus the adolescent that something happens, boom, I make up a story about it. Something else happens, boom, I'm going to make up a story and an assumption about it. But the way that we bust the story is to slide into the adult chair and start asking ourselves, what's true?
How do we know when we're in it? Because, I imagine if you're not doing the work actively, that when somebody cuts you off or when the granddaughter's face changes, that you don't even recognize that you're in story mode.
We don't.
So how do you build that habit? Like, what am I looking for then as that trigger of, I need to stop, I need to slow down, and I need to have this conversation. This is making me feel uncomfortable, disappointed, sad, whatever.
And it takes practice. Because we live most of our day in this adolescent chair, the more present moment that we become, the more aware that we become, the more conscious that we become. It's like we have to slide more energy over to our adult chair. And when we spend more time there, then these awarenesses come more frequently. But we have to make the conscious choice to say, I'm going to start catching myself on stories with all my stories. And the thing that I love, I have friends in my life and family, and I encourage them to be my story busters for me because we are living such an unconscious life, a reactionary life so much of the day. But the more people that we have around us that will laugh with me, they're not like, Michelle, you're doing it again. They'll say to me, hold on, is that a story? I'm like, oh crap, it is. But the more I have people that are helpers of mine, the more it just becomes an automatic thing that I do.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the trigger. And, I just got me thinking, like when you think about the automatic lives that we live, I think about for example, just a small example, my interaction on social media. How easy is it for us to be scrolling through our Twitter feed or our Facebook feed and see some post or a photo from some long-lost friend or family member, and we see may have an innocuous comment, but then we make up that we sort of fill in the blanks with this story about its relationship to us, and it can make us feel, bad, sad, unhappy, happy, elated, but it's all based on something that's in our heads. I wonder if there isn't some sort of an impact on just the way that these stories are coming into our lives, giving us so much more fodder to react to.
I love that you brought up the social media because I really could do an all-day class on this, the Facebook mirage.
Yes.
Do you know how many clients I have that sit with me in the client chair in my office and cry because their lives are so bad based on so-and-so's life on Facebook because they have, a wife and they have children and their life is so good and blah, blah, blah. But what are they doing? They're making up stories and assumptions about something, one post that they read on Facebook. So they have a whole story and assumption up about how awful their life is and how wonderful so-and-so's life is because you read that they went to the park with their family on Saturday and had a great time and there's a picture of it.
Right.
So then the whole story gets built up. Well, they must do that every weekend and they da-da-da, and it drives, and then it makes us feel bad the more the story builds. And
it conditions us to continue to respond to stories offline too, right?
Yes.
We're essentially building a muscle that this is how we're going to react to life, reactionarily.
And the reaction part of us is from the adolescent versus responding is what the adult part of us does. It's a very different way.
I almost feel like we need an episode called How the Adult Chair Reads Facebook.
Yes, we really do. If I had $1 for every person that has sat down with me and said, well, I am in the worst mood today. Well, why is that? Well, because let me tell you what I just saw on Facebook.
There you go.
So, but we just want to become mindful of, hold on a second. Is this a story? Like, what do I know about this that's true? I have many couples that will come in and one of the partners will sit in front of me and say, well, he or she did this and this and this, and they'll never, ever change. They'll never change. Well, is that true? I'll ask them, is that true? Well, I don't know, but they've been doing this pattern for many, many years. Okay, well, is it true that they'll never change?
Yeah.
Well, no, I guess not. I have people that have recently met someone, like I have other people that are on Match.com that will come in and they'll come in and make up giant stories and assumptions about people that they've met and how the relationship is going to go. And this is working out because of this and that. And I really try to help these people like, well, hold on, like, what do we know that's true about this person? Because we go into that fantasy or that story about how we hope that it will be.
Yes.
So it's positive and it flips to the other side as well. You know, it's the worst thing possible or it's the best thing possible. And we make up these stories and assumptions. Underneath it all is, you know, we have all of these feelings and we're trying to mask all these feelings.
So what is the big takeaway? You know, I asked, I think, what is a loaded question, you know, how do we know when we're in it? And your answer was we have to practice. And part of, I think, what you're getting at is, and what I'm taking away from this conversation is that it's the awareness itself that this exists.
Yes.
And seeing the example or hearing your example of your interaction with your husband and describing that conversation is what starts the process of becoming aware of it in myself or in the case of our listeners in themselves. I think there is that this becomes a platform to start being aware of your world differently from the adult chair.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Can I tell another story? Just one more story.
Please.
It was so great. I had, I remember I was doing a group class and I had this lovely woman that was in my class and we had talked about this in class and she started applying it to her life and she said, this is changing my whole life. This one concept that we're talking about today, she said, this is changing. And I hear that from a lot of people. She said she just started dating a guy that she'd met and they would speak. I don't remember the whole story. Something like this. Like they'd speak every day at 7:30, every night at 7:30 after work. Mm-hmm. And they were dating just for a few weeks. And there was this one day that he didn't call her at 7:30. And she waited till 8:30 and 9:30 and 10. And by 9:30, she was panicked. And again, she said, I started making up all kinds of stories and assumptions. He doesn't want to date me anymore. It's probably because the other day when I was with him, we talked about this and that probably drove him away and blah, 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 blah. That's how the brain works again. We're making up all kinds of stories and assumptions, trying to understand why this person wouldn't call her back. She said at about 10 o'clock, she finally said to herself, what do I know that's true? And she said, all that I know that's true is that he just hasn't called me. Period. And she said she just felt this wave of like, wow, I've been telling myself stories for like two or 3 hours.
Seriously, how many of us have not felt this way, though? I mean,
exactly.
Particularly when you're dealing with somebody that's in kind of a romantic situation.
Exactly, because we're on that high and all that in the beginning. And she said by 11 o'clock, he texted her and said he was really sorry. I think he had to, he got like a haircut and then he had to go do something after work and he was just getting home. And he apologized for taking so long. But, he had a few things to do after work. Period. And she thought, oh my God, I made up this whole story. And she said it saved her. She said it's really changes everything when you start taking these stories and assumptions out of your life. And it really, really does. It's just being aware of them and catching ourselves and practicing, and then it becomes a natural habit.
That is a beautiful thing and a great way to leave this show. I hope people have gotten something good out of this. I know I have, because I live in story mode, I think far too often.
Yep. It will really change you if you start asking yourself, hold on, what's true right now in this moment? That's the other thing. The adult shares in the present moment. So we have to say, in this moment, not 10 years ago what was true, but for right now, what's true? Well,
right, true, okay. Not and not what's true in a year or in 10 years. We don't know.
Moment.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
This is so fun. I love it.
It is so fun. I am just thrilled every time we get to have these conversations. For more information, if you are listening to the show on the website at michellchalfant.com, you can also head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show for free in iTunes or your podcast application of choice. It's really very easy to do, and we've got some instructions up on the site to help you with that. So we encourage you to subscribe, and if this has connected to you in any way, shape, or form, we invite you to share it with others that you think might get something out of the good and kind wisdom of Michelle Chalfant. So thank you so much for listening. On behalf of Michelle, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on The Adult Chair.